Lights, camera, action.
Hey everybody.
Hey guys.
Welcome back to the podcast. We hope you enjoyed last week's episode where we covered Casino Royale. One of my favorite movies.
Very good.
Such a good one. This week, we are really excited to be covering our very first war film. In my personal opinion, I think it is one of, if not the greatest war film, and also one of the greatest films just in general. Super powerful story. Also an incredibly important period in history. Mm-hmm. So without further ado, today we are talking about Saving Private Ryan, one of Tom Hanks' best movies, one of Steven Spielberg's best movies. It's just a phenomenal movie all the way around.
Yes.
I'm excited to dive in. So with that, Emily, will you lead us off?
I will. So Saving Private Ryan was released on July 24th, 1998. So John, you would have been 5 months old.
Oh, yeah.
It was directed by Steven Spielberg. It is starring Tom Hanks, Matt Damon, Tom Sizemore, Vin Diesel, Edward Burns, Barry Pepper, Jeremy Davies, Adam Goldberg, Paul Giamatti, and Bryan Cranston.
Solid cast.
Yes, very. And when I was reading, a lot of these, like big name actors were not well known when this movie came out. A lot of them were.
No, they weren't.
Yeah.
Tom Hanks was really the only established star. Mm-hmm. Vin Diesel was not a big Hollywood star.
Right.
Actually, I was very interested in learning. I'll do a little bunny trail here for a second. Vin Diesel was handpicked by Steven Spielberg.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So at the time, he was like working other jobs because he wasn't able to make it as a full-time actor. But he was like a legitimate auteur in terms of he was writing, directing, shooting, and starring in his own films back in the early 90s-ish in that neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And they caught the attention of Steven Spielberg.
Wow.
Since then, he's kind of just been an action star with the Fast and Furious movies, which are
careful
mixed. They're very mixed. They're not there was definitely some good ones in there, but the majority of them are not my cup of tea anymore. They're very over the top. Mm-hmm. But this was much earlier than any of that.
Yeah.
So that was interesting to me. Also, this was only Matt Damon's second film, big film.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to be like his first film.
Right.
In terms of big movies. Spielberg did not anticipate Good Will Hunting being nearly as big of a success as it was, but
another good movie.
Yeah, that is a great movie. Mm-hmm. But he visited the set one day and Robin Williams actually introduced him to Matt. And that's when Spielberg decided to cast him for the movie. But he's like, oh, this is perfect. I want somebody who's relatively unknown, who's young. And then obviously Good Will Hunting was it was a huge breakout success. But
right.
Anywho.
Yeah. So the movie was distributed by, I found two, Paramount and DreamWorks.
And that's actually accurate.
Yeah.
So it was originally supposed to be just Paramount, but then once Spielberg signed on, which I'll get into this, not a whole lot more, but a little bit more in production details, but he kind of assumed a lot of control of the film in general. And he ended up having his company, which if you don't know, Steven Spielberg founded DreamWorks. Like he is the guy for DreamWorks, like Walt Disney was for Disney, Steven Spielberg is for DreamWorks. So he founded DreamWorks, and once he was signed on to the movie, he kind of brought DreamWorks on board.
Gotcha.
Yep.
So this movie had a runtime of 2 hours and 49 minutes. It is rated R. It had a budget of $70 million and box office total of $482.3 million.
Yeah.
So quite a profit there.
Yeah.
So some fun facts about the movie. First, I have a few casting details. First off, Harrison Ford, Mel Gibson, and I'm going to probably say this last name wrong, Postlethwaite. Is that correct?
That's the entire name, or that's the last name?
Pete Postlethwaite.
I'm unfamiliar with the actor, so I can't give you context.
I looked him up and I recognized him, but here.
Oh, yes, I do know him. Yes. I couldn't tell you if you're pronouncing it right or wrong, but yes.
Well, anyways, those three actors were considered for Captain Miller, in addition to Tom Hanks. Also, Edward Norton was one of the other considerations to play Private Ryan, and they also considered Noah Weil. And then while filming Saving Private Ryan, Tom Sizemore was like trying to kick a pretty bad drug addiction. And things were so severe that Steven Spielberg had him drug tested every day and said that even if it was the end of the production, he would have him recast on the spot if he failed any of his drug tests.
Yeah, he actually, before Spielberg cast him in the movie, knew that he was struggling with drug addiction. But Spielberg really wanted him to play that part, because he knew that he was probably perfect for the role. So that was his stipulation. He said, I'm going to cast you in this movie. I'm going to pay you this amount of money, but you're going to be drug tested every single week. And, if you slip up at all, we're going to recast you and you're going to be done, which I have a massive amount of respect for.
Yeah.
On the one hand, I mean, he's an asset to the film. So for Spielberg, this is the right guy for the role, and I'm going to cast him. So I totally see that part of it, but also too, like standing by your people. I think that is really, that's a really big deal. And that is, drug addiction in general is rampant in Hollywood. There are so many people that struggle hardcore with it, and alcoholism. So it is not, an uncommon thing. And directors have done this many times, maybe not exactly this, but have done similar situations. So I think that is, it's a big deal, helping people get through that. And that's really cool that was the case. If you don't know who Tom Sizemore is in the movie, he plays Mike Horvath, which is basically Tom Hanks' character's Captain Miller. It's his second in command.
So my next fact is pretty interesting. Steven Spielberg had the cast go through like a 10-day boot camp. He said that he didn't do it to teach them proper military techniques, but to teach them to respect what it was like to be a soldier, which I thought was really cool. And
to give even more context, the conditions were awful.
Oh, I'm sure.
So Tom Hanks and Vin Diesel have publicly spoken about it, and just talking about that, like, they were only allowed to sleep 3 hours per day, and it rained pretty much every single day, and they had to do lots of push-ups and jumping jacks, and I think I don't remember how many miles, but they had to run, it might have been 10 miles a day or something like that. They had to do a lot.
That's crazy.
Just to kind of get in the feel of what these guys were going through on a daily basis. But anyways, continue.
So Steven Spielberg did not have Matt Damon participate in the boot camp, though, because he didn't want Matt to bond with the rest of the cast and possibly even create a feeling of resentment in the actors toward Matt, just to kind of help portray that resentment on screen,
Yes,
so
they actively wanted the actors going through the boot camp to dislike Private Ryan.
Yes.
Or Matt Damon, which I think comes through very well in the film. They, are cursing him out regularly and talking about how he's awful and it's not worth it and all this stuff when he's not present, and even to his face sometimes too. But yeah, that message comes through very clearly. So it might have paid off.
Yeah.
I also, on that, Vin Diesel was talking about when they were going through that, just how much respect he gained for Tom Hanks, who he already respected. Because again, at the time, Vin Diesel was not a star. The majority of the guys on the film were not anybody at the time, except for Tom Hanks. And so after going through maybe halfway through, let's just say, I don't remember what he said exactly, but they were at a breaking point, and everybody there was ready to quit. They said, this is stupid. They're angry. They're mad at each other. They're mad at the fact that they're there. This is supposed to be a movie that they're doing. They don't have to deal with this, all this stuff. And so everybody's getting ready to quit. And Tom Hanks just starts talking to them. He's like, guys, what are you doing? And talks them out of it and just takes a stand and talking about how this is what these guys went through. These soldiers that you're portraying, this is what they went through on a daily basis. And they had to go through not only boot camp, but also war. And so he was, gave these guys a really rousing speech and everybody stayed there. But what Vin said, he said, I gained so much for respect for Tom because that week was brutal. None of us got any sleep. We were eating very little. It was rainy. It was cold. We were exhausted because we were doing this excessive amount of exercise, work, activities, whatever you want to call it. And here's a guy who definitely doesn't need to be here because he's already arrived. And he is already a breakout, or not a breakout, but he's this huge movie star. And he's choosing to be here. And not only that, but all these other people who have these horrible attitudes aren't having an effect on him. And he's actually taking a stand to, maybe open their eyes or help turn them away from that. And so he was just kind of really praising Tom for that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
My next fact is that the D-Day scene alone cost $12 million and used over 1,500 extras. And despite all of that money spent and all of the extras that they hired, Steven Spielberg didn't storyboard that scene. He didn't plan it out precisely because he said that he wanted spontaneous reactions and he wanted the action to kind of inspire the different shots and things.
Yes.
And then on that note, 20 to 30, they didn't give an exact number in my research, but 20 to 30 of the extras in the D-Day scene were amputees. They wore prosthetics so that they could play soldiers who had a limb blown off or something like that.
Yeah, I also saw that. The number I saw was 30, but
okay.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter. But yeah, I thought that was super cool that they had actual people who were paraplegics or amputees who had prosthetic limbs on that were, they were made to look like they were being blown off. It just adds another layer of realism, especially in today's world. Not that it can't be done well, but the majority of the effects in this film are practical. Really the only CGI in this movie is just a lot of the blood splatters and stuff like that, kind of stuff off in the distance. They did stuff using CGI, but the majority of it's all real practical, which always looks amazing. Yeah. But, in today's world, that would have been a guy with a green screen sleeve on his arm that they're then just digitally replacing or something. Or sometimes, it's so advanced now that they don't even wear a sleeve. They just will paint it out. It's pretty crazy. But anyways, I think it's really, really cool that they did that.
Yeah. Next is that many World War II veterans that went to see the movie said that it was the most realistic depiction of the war that they had ever seen. And a lot of them, if they went to see it in the theater, had to leave during the D-Day scene just because of PTSD and things like that, which is really hard to think about.
Yeah.
On a lighter note, when the camera shakes during explosions in the movie, Steven Spielberg used drills attached to the side of the camera. He attached drills to it. And then obviously they just turned on the drills when he wanted the camera to appear shaky. Yeah. And then while shooting with the drills on the camera, the crew's photographer let Steven Spielberg know that there was it's called shaky cam. They can use a shaker lens for the camera. And Spielberg said in an interview that he actually thought that he had invented like this great new technique with the drills, but it was already a thing.
Yeah, that's hilarious. That is really funny because I did not know that. And oftentimes that's what they do. They put a special lens on the film or on the camera. And then most of the time, not all the time, but a lot of the time, people who are using that, I guess a cameraman, isn't using like a shoulder mounted camera. They're kind of trying to hold it in a way that's not technically proper so that you're getting more of that chaotic type feel coming through in the shots.
Right. And then I have just one more fact. It is that in 2006, Tom Hanks was inducted into the U.S. Army's Ranger Hall of Fame as an honorary member, largely because of his portrayal of Captain John Miller in this movie.
Yeah, which is amazing.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I did know that in the film he portrayed a ranger, which is super cool. I have a soft spot, a deep love for the Army Rangers. However, I did not realize that he was inducted into the Ranger Hall of Fame. That's super cool. Yeah. Okay, my turn.
Your turn.
Okay, so I have some production details for you. I had to kind of cherry pick and cut down because there is a lot of information on this. But I don't want this to be a crazy long episode, and I want to have time to talk, just us. So, with that, I will jump right in. The idea for Saving Private Ryan goes all the way back to 1995, which this film was released in 98. So about 3 years prior to the film being released, the idea was conceived by producer Robert Rodat, or maybe it's Roday. I don't know his background, but that's what I'm going with. He was gifted the book titled D-Day, June 6, 1944, The Climactic Battle of World War II, written by Stephen E. Ambrose. The book recounts many things about World War II, including the Nyland brothers, 4 men who were deployed during World War II. 2 of them were killed in action, and the third was presumed dead. And per the sole survivor policy, the 4th Nyland son returned from war. Rodat conceived the idea for Saving Private Ryan a few weeks after receiving the book from his wife, stating that the idea of losing a son to war is horrible. The idea of losing all of your sons is world-shattering. It's devastating. And so that's kind of where the whole premise for the movie comes from. Shortly after this, a script was developed, and it eventually landed in the hands of Tom Hanks. Tom loved the script and immediately wanted to be a part of the project. At that point in time, Hanks and Steven Spielberg had never worked together, but they had been talking and they really wanted to collaborate. So Tom got Steven Spielberg a copy of the script. Spielberg signed on shortly thereafter and quickly gained full control of the film and production and all decisions relative to the movie. Producer Robert Rodat was not involved really at all after Spielberg signed on, outside of getting a credit for writing the initial script, which a lot was changed, but there's still stuff in there from when he wrote it. During pre-production, Spielberg met with many World War II veterans because he felt a heavy responsibility to do the film justice to the actual events of World War II. Many veterans told Spielberg the same thing, which was, please be honest about it. Please don't make another Hollywood movie about World War II. Please tell our stories. And that's exactly what he did. Principal photography began on June 27th, 1997. Shooting locations include Ireland, England, and France. And I only have 2 more bullet points here because I really wanted to keep it brief because it was almost aimless / endless as far as where I could go, what I could talk about. So I kind of narrowed it down just to 2 things, which is that while shooting action scenes, Spielberg intentionally had the cameraman keep the camera very close to the ground because he wanted to make it feel like it was being filmed by a combat cameraman or or a soldier who was avoiding being shot. And then the last point I have is that while filming the D-Day sequence, which is basically the first half hour, 45 minutes, I don't remember how long, 20 to 45 minutes of the film, that's where the whole movie starts. Regarding that whole scene / sequence, Tom Hanks had this to say. He said, "The first day of shooting, I was in the back of the landing craft and that ramp went down. And I saw the first 1, 2, 3, 4 rows of guys just getting blown to bits. In my head, of course, I knew it was special effects, but I still wasn't prepared for how tactile it was. The air literally turned pink, and the noise was deafening, and there's bits and pieces of stuff falling all on top of you, and it was horrifying." Which I thought was just a really... I don't know if incredible is the right word, but I mean...
Powerful.
Kind of, it leaves you speechless when you really if you really think about what he said there, and just, I think the quote itself is a testament to how authentic Spielberg tried to make all of this, which is really, really important. History is incredibly important. You know, if we don't know our history, we're doomed to repeat it. This was probably one of, if not the most significant event in modern history. The world as we know it would look drastically different had we not won World War II. So the fact that they tried to depict it as realistic as possible is really a big deal, as well as being respectful to the men who went through this. So I think that is really cool that is being echoed by Tom Hanks.
Yeah, I agree.
And that is all I had for production details.
Okay.
So I will go first. Scale of 1 to 100, I am going to give this a 98.
Wow.
Yes. I would almost say, you know what? I will. I'm going to tie it with Interstellar at a 98.5.
Okay.
How would you rate it?
You don't want to elaborate on that at all?
I mean, I can,
you
but
don't
I think
have to,
I'm
but...
going to. So I want to hear what your score is.
Okay. I'm going to give this movie a 96, I think.
That's actually what I predicted you were going to score it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I knew that mine was going to be higher solely because I know you do like war movies, just like that you do like, I know you like action movies in general, but war movies are different than action movies. They're not, but they are because they're depicting history. So there's a lot of significance there. But anyways, I knew that that you enjoyed the story. I knew that you liked the movie, but I also knew that it was really hard for you to watch because it was very gory, but there were also some scenes that, I mean, they would, not that you did, but just in general, they would leave you in tears. There were some really, really just intense, like hardcore scenes in this movie. And I know that was kind of hard to stomach. So that's actually what I predicted you would score.
Yeah. I've only seen this movie once and it's been a while. But I just remember after watching it, I mean, cause like we'll watch movies, whether it's for the podcast or just, because,
Right.
and it'll just be at the end. It's like, oh, okay, like let's, go to bed or let's eat dinner or let's, whatever is
Right.
going to happen next.
Yep.
But after this, I just had to sit for a little bit and just like process, I guess, because I mean, yes, I have seen war movies before, but I think this is probably one of the most powerful movies I've ever seen, just in terms of they really get you to recognize like people went through this, people did this, and people are doing this and going through this right now as we speak. And so it's just very powerful, and the message is, I mean, I can't think of any synonyms for powerful off the top of my head right now, but it's just, it was a lot to process.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And it was probably one of the most gory movies I've ever seen. But as much as I don't love watching that stuff, like, I feel like it made it that much more impactful because it shows you, you know, what actually happened.
Right.
And yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. This movie is a lot. And that's, you know, speaking purely just to the violence. But when you start to weigh out all of that, and then the fact that like you said, there were people who went through this and are going through this who are actively serving. You know, it's just a different era. It might not be the exact same, but it's very similar. That is really hard just to wrap your head around, that this is people's reality. War is reality for many people. And when you separate the movie from all the violence and the battle, even outside of that, this is just a great movie. It's a really powerful story. It's acted extremely well. The cinematography in this movie is gorgeous. And it's directed really, really well. I mean, I really have no critiques or complaints about this movie. Which is why I feel very strong as far as scoring it. I mean, it is tied with Interstellar, which is our highest scoring movie that we've done. So yeah, I mean, it's a phenomenal film. And I feel strongly that if you haven't watched this movie, go watch it. If you are somebody who is at all interested in World War II, go watch this movie. If you're somebody who is maybe unfamiliar with some of the events of World War II or the history, definitely go watch this movie. I really think strongly that this is a movie that people should watch maybe once a year. You know, if you are a parent who has children that, you know, this is definitely something that you need to weigh out as far as age appropriate. They need to be older. I don't think I watched this until I was in high school, maybe sophomore in high school, maybe junior. So we're in that 16, 17 range. But you definitely, they need to be older, and you have to weigh out whether this is appropriate for them. But they should watch this because I know we hear this a lot sometimes, but you can never hear it enough, and it can be easily forgotten. We're forgetful people. And if you hear things a lot, it means it's probably important. We need to be reminded of it. But freedom is not free. And that is a really, really powerful truth, I think, that comes through in this movie, especially when the last half hour or so of the movie is this insane battle. And then after the battle, you see the aged Private Ryan, who is saluting the graves of the men who fought to bring him home. I mean, it's a hard truth to swallow. Freedom is not free, and it's easy to forget, especially when we get in our daily routines of going to work and, all our extracurricular activities. It's great hanging out with friends and eating some good food and, whatever. But people died. Blood was shed so that you could do that. And that's really something that should measure your actions. And I don't feel like it's reflected enough in our society. And that's just kind of human nature and sinfulness and selfishness and self-centeredness. But that's a conversation for another time. But anywho, this movie is phenomenal. I have a lot of respect for it.
Yeah, me too.
So on that note, likes, dislikes, or favorite scenes?
I don't know that I necessarily have any dislikes. I mean, like I said, like I struggle with a ton of gore, but I don't think the movie would be as impactful without it, I think. But
Yeah.
other than that, I don't have anything that I'd necessarily say like, oh, this, I didn't like this part, you know?
Right.
But as far as the scenes that I think were like they stood out the most, I guess, one of them was when they're stopping. I think someone had like something in his shoe or something. I can't remember exactly, but they stop, and when he sits down, like he knocks over a pole, and the like a wall completely crumbles.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's like a ton of like soldiers on the other side of it, and like it's an immediate.
The Germans.
German
soldiers.
Yeah, sorry, I should have
enemy
specified.
soldiers.
Yes. German soldiers were on the other side, and like obviously like they're Germans and they're Americans, so they immediately like are in a standoff and like screaming at each other, like
everybody draws their guns.
Yeah. So that is like a super standout scene. It's one that I don't know. It was just really intense, and
it definitely is. It's one of those scenes that really sneaks up on you too, because up until that point, I mean, that sequence is kind of like a down moment in the movie, so to speak. Like the guys are just traveling to get to Private Ryan. They finally rendezvous with some other soldiers. They're kind of debriefing, talking, resting. And then out of nowhere, this guy sits down and an entire wall falls over. And then, I mean, it goes from 0 to 100 in like 2 seconds, probably less than that. And like the tension, the stakes is palpable. And that scene, like it is so intense. And I think too, that's kind of a testament to the reality of World War II. Just that there were so many things like that were really close, just like operating really close together, really close calls, and that it was a hard fought war, and it was not ideal, I guess is maybe a good way to put it. And just something like that comes absolutely out of nowhere that you're not expecting. That is kind of maybe a through line during World War II.
Yeah. My next one would be kind of two, because there are two specific scenes with snipers that were stand out.
Yes.
One when I can't remember his name. What's the sniper's name that like he wears the cross necklace?
Yes, I don't remember his character's name.
I don't know. It's not a huge deal, but the scene when he is I think it's the scene when
Private Jackson.
Okay.
I believe that's who he was. I have the cast pulled up here.
Okay. So the scene when he is like shooting, and as he's going, he's like praying.
Yes. Yep.
So I thought that was a really impactful scene. And then also the scene when there's a German sniper in a tower, and again, I'm gonna forget a name. It's when it's Vin Diesel's character, I believe, that had just like
Private Caparzo.
Okay.
Yep.
So he was down, and he had like a letter to his father in his hand, and he's like trying to give it to this guy that's hiding,
Yep.
And then like the German sniper gets shot, but like right before that, like he shoots, and it's just like again another really like intense like moment in the movie. Yeah,
and that's another one that like there's a little more build up to it, so the audience
we know something's coming,
right? You know about it, and you're expecting it a little bit, but it still kind of sneaks up on you because leading up to that, they were basically going into a city, and Vin Diesel disobeyed orders and started engaging in I mean, I guess you could call it conversation. They weren't really able to communicate.
Yeah.
But it was a family that was stuck in it. Well, maybe not stuck, but they were in their house and they were trying to give their children to the soldiers. And Vin Diesel, his character, ended up holding one of them, which was like a big no-no. Like they weren't even supposed to interact with the family. And then he was, holding the little girl who he said looked like his little niece. And then he ended up putting her down and then got shot afterwards. But yeah, that scene is another one that just, I think especially because he has that letter, that's what makes it hurt so much. It's gut wrenching.
Yes.
But also, it kind of sneaks up on you.
And then the only other one that I have written down, I'm sure there's more, but I just wrote down a few, was in the final battle when Captain Miller gets shot, and then he's like just sitting leaning up against like a pile of rubble, I think. And he continues to shoot at that tank even when he's down and is clearly probably going to die, like just continuing, like he's just going to go till the end. Yeah,
and like the way he's carrying himself as he's shooting, like you can tell, like his body's wavering, like he's even like the demeanor on his face, like you can tell that like he's fading.
Yes.
And yes, that scene is a really, really powerful one. It's, I don't know. The very first time I watched it, I wasn't expecting Tom Hanks' character to die.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't either.
Definitely wasn't rooting against that. And then when it starts to happen, it is devastating. And then, like, he does die, and that is very sad. But also, like, maybe what was even more unexpected is when he's, like, on one of his last shots, the tank explodes. And it's because the Allied forces had come through with the Air Force, and they bombed the tank.
Yeah. And
then they ended up winning that battle, and Private Ryan was safe.
And that's all of the scenes that I have.
Okay. Well, I kind of wish I would have outlined some of mine more. Because it's been a while since we watched this movie, actually. We did not watch this one close to when we recorded. It's been months. But that's okay. I do know the entire opening sequence, like D-Day itself, is one of... It feels weird calling it my favorite scene.
Yeah, that's why I didn't use that phrase.
Because it is a real event that happened. But that scene in particular was done extremely well. One, just because, I mean, veterans themselves had said that was extremely realistic, depicted, very true to what they experienced. But also, just like, it's very long, and which in what I would assume, that's how it should feel, right? In my opinion. I mean, that should be a situation where you're feeling disoriented and like there's an insane amount of adrenaline, and it should feel super intense, but also it should feel like, is this going to last forever? And I believe that they achieved all of that in that opening sequence. And two, just like, especially, I feel like the feeling of the soldiers is conveyed really well to the audience through Tom Hanks' character's expressions, and like kind of following his character throughout that whole thing, Captain Miller, right? Yeah. Following Captain Miller and seeing his reactions and how he's handling everything, that whole message is conveyed really, really well to the audience. And I think that's really important in order to make this whole thing work, because I don't think it should be making you feel like there's this invincible action hero that's coming through and never going to be on, like, you don't want to feel like they're coming through it and there was never any stakes, that they got through untouched without breaking a sweat. That was fought tooth and nail, and the idea of actually surviving that was abysmal.
Yeah.
So I think that's really, really, it's done really, really well. I really, really appreciate it because I just have a lot of respect for them carrying out the responsibility of being respectful. And then two, like, I don't want to say that this resonates with me because I'm not a veteran. I have not served. I have not been to war. But I have been in some really high stakes situations that are extremely disorienting. And when you're not prepared for it, like some of the first times that I had to administer emergency medicine, I guess I can understand the feeling that's being conveyed by Captain Miller in those sequences is how I felt being put into rooms where someone is bleeding out, their guts are all over the table, and just 2 minutes prior, I was having a conversation with a kid giving them a breathing treatment. Just things can happen that fast, and when you're not prepared for it, you get this insane amount of adrenaline, and you have to make these decisions in an extremely short amount of time. Otherwise, it means somebody's going to die. So, again, I have not been to war. I am not a veteran, and that's not the message that I want to convey, that I understand what they went through, because I don't. But in my experience of what I did do, as far as, being in an intensive care unit and working in the emergency room, doing those sorts of things, I get that feeling, and I think the message is conveyed well. I've kind of hit on that a few times now, so I don't want to keep talking about it. But anyways, I have an appreciation for that. I also really, really like the sequence where it's kind of at the end. Actually, it is towards the end when they're having kind of that final battle. And the sniper, we were just talking about him, Private Jackson. Yes, Private Jackson he's praying as he's going through and taking out the enemy soldiers. And it ultimately ends up leading to the tank shooting the bell tower, and he dies. But that whole sequence is, I think, done really, really well. Just the overall feeling of desperation, because for them, he was up in that bell tower, providing a lot of covering fire, being able to also convey messages to the other soldiers, because he was able to kind of have a bird's eye view, and he was relaying, oh yeah, there's 30 men coming on foot on the north side or whatever. He was doing all that messaging. But he also had a guy up there who had like a 50 cal, I think it was. Maybe it was a 30 cal, I don't remember. But that was up there in the bell tower with him. And as the sequence progressed, they ran out of ammo for the machine gun. Because it was Corporal Upham, who was the guy, the reporter, who was supposed to be running them ammo, and
that's an intense
he got spread kind of thin, and he got separated because of the action, but he also made a choice, and he was overwhelmed by the adrenaline, and he started sitting out of the battle, and it ended up costing multiple people their life. But anywho, just because he wasn't able to get there and get them that ammo, you can continue to feel the desperation grow.
Right.
And then it ultimately ends up in the sniper dying because of the tank. But I like that whole sequence. It's done well. You feel exactly how you should feel. And that character, I just really like seeing him do his thing. And praying throughout it. I really, really like him. And then outside of that, I think the only other scene that immediately comes to mind is shortly after they find some German soldiers in a field and one of their men die. all of the soldiers get into an argument, which ultimately leads to Private Reiben, played by Edward Burns, basically saying, like, I'm done with this. I'm leaving. This is stupid. I don't care about Private Ryan. All my friends, my soldiers, they're dying, and I'm done with this. This is costing men, and it's for one guy's life. This is dumb. And he just is kind of going off, and all the guys, they kind of start feeding off each other. And Captain Miller, Tom Hanks' character, he dives in and he silences everybody, and everybody starts listening to him. And he gives this incredible speech just talking about, like, look, I don't know Private Ryan, and I don't know any of this. And he goes on just talking about all this stuff about, like, you're probably right. This probably isn't worth it. And I hate that my men are dying, and saying all these things. But he kind of caps it at the end with something that's extremely honest, which is that, you know what? This is my mission. And if completing this mission means that I get to go home to see my wife, then that's my only focus, because I want to be home with my wife.
Yeah.
And so that was, his whole thing. And then everybody kind of stands behind him and nobody leaves. And I think that's really, really cool. Maybe one of the greatest, definitely in the top 10, top 5 speeches ever given in a movie. Super powerful.
Yeah, for sure.
But outside of that, I think that's all that I want to touch on at the moment.
Yeah, I think I'm good too. The only thing I wanted to add was just for people listening, if you are currently serving or retired veteran, just thank you. And if you know a person who has served in the military in some capacity, tell them thank you, because like Jon said earlier, it's something that I think a lot of people forget about easily, just getting caught up in day-to-day things, and we would not be where we are today without them. So yeah, no, I agree. Thank you for your service. If you have actively served, or if you're actively serving or have served, thank you. We appreciate you. Thank a veteran if you see him. Freedom is not free. Don't forget that. And hopefully that message is what comes through in this podcast episode. And I hope that it impacts you going out into the world this week, this month, this year, the rest of your life, whatever it is. Just remember that the things that we enjoy in this life come at a cost, and it's a high cost. And maybe especially consider that going into an election year. These things do matter. As much as it seems like they don't, they do. And so yeah, just we have a lot to be thankful for. So thank you for your service. And with that, I think we're wrapped up on this episode. So thank you guys for listening. It was a lot of fun covering this movie. One of the best, if not the best, war movies. And the only other one that comes to mind as being right up there is Hacksaw Ridge. That is also another phenomenal movie. But we are not covering Hacksaw Ridge next week. We are actually having quite the transition from a war movie to next week. We are covering The Princess Diaries. So completely two different worlds. And that's okay. There's absolutely room for both. So we are going to be covering The Princess Diaries, an all-time classic Anne Hathaway movie. It is streaming currently on Disney Plus if you want to watch it in advance. And with that, we appreciate you guys listening. If you liked what you heard, leave us a comment, give us a thumbs up, give us a 5-star rating. We really appreciate those of you who have taken the time to do it. It does help our growth. We are growing, but every little bit helps out. So thank you guys for doing that. If you haven't given us a 5-star rating,
that really is what goes the longest way on Spotify. So if you would consider doing that, we would really appreciate it.
Okay, well, with that, we will see you next week.
Thanks, guys. Bye.